What's good, Vibers? One of the most important mechanics in SUPERVIVE that doesn't really translate from any other games are the Abyss, gliding, and getting spiked. Now, my goal for this video is for it to be potentially one of the most useful SUPERVIVE videos you ever watch, because it will not only save you from 10,000 deaths in the Abyss, it will actually give you the ability to use the Abyss to your advantage and use it to outplay and destroy opponents. All right, so diving right in, one of the most important things to sort of keep in mind with your glider is it not only gives you horizontal distance, it also gives you verticality. And so let's check this out. If I jump off, you're sort of going down in the abyss. If I pull my glider out, see how it brings me back up to that neutral line and even like shoots me up above it a little bit because of the momentum. So basically once you kind of understand that, you can get a lot more kind of value and distance out of your glider. So rather than doing something like this, where you're just kind of like gliding, you know, in one direction, you can do something more like this, and this is basically just going to give you like a lot more sort of time to exist in the abyss. And it's basically some combination of your dodging and your glider, but you're basically wanting to, as you're going below that vertical line, you're using your glider, or the horizontal plane, you're using your glider to sort of rise you back up, and you're using its momentum to sort of push you up above that line. And so that's something that I think is really important to kind of get used to, is how you can kind of use the depth of the abyss to protect yourself, and then use the glider to come back up. And that sort of momentum coming up is going to buy you a lot of time, and it's going to let you sort of feel like you can like hang out a lot better over the abyss, right? And what's really important to practice with this, or just with the abyss in general, is getting comfortable with this line. So like, how deep can I go before that happens? And you want to start getting really comfortable with like, how deep is that? Where is that line? And so we can kind of see it just by falling a couple times. It's kind of deep. Like we actually have a lot of space down here to work. This mechanic that I'm doing right here, this is called Mantling. And so what this is anytime you are over the abyss and you hit terrain, you will actually front flip all the way up it, like an infinite amount of times. The only thing that's required is you have to actually be able to walk on this ground. So like, let's say there was a wall right here. Like, I wouldn't be able to mantle where the wall is. You actually have to have access to the terrain. But anywhere you do have access to the terrain, if you hit that wall below this horizontal like line, or the horizontal plane, you'll just sort of front flip back up. And so something really useful to practice is just sort of getting comfortable with that line, like kind of knowing how deep you can go, how much momentum you can kind of carry with WASD to go back and forth, right? But just stuff like this, where you're kind of just practicing, you know, how much can I kind of, how much wiggle room do I have down here in the abyss? And you can see you have quite a bit, right? And so without even like dashing or really doing anything, you can sort of just exist over the abyss without your glider. And I think that's what you really want to start thinking about. That's how you want to start thinking about it, is only glide over the abyss when you absolutely have to. And especially if you're pushing an enemy team. So if there's fighting over the abyss and I need to cross this gap, I literally need to do it without gliding. Like, if I'm pushing an enemy team, I need to not glide here at all. And so you need to literally just be ready to hop, go deep, dash, mantle. And that's actually going to protect you too, because it's going to be harder to hit you. And so basically this game it's designed in a 2D plane. Like the projectiles and everything is calculated in a 2D plane, but there's verticality to it. So to account for that, when we go below this horizontal plane, see this red thing? That's basically my soul now. And that's my new hitbox. So as soon as you're below the horizontal line in the abyss, anyone that's shooting at you is shooting at that red box. So that's the other thing. If you see an enemy below the abyss line, instead of shooting at their body, you're shooting at this red bubble. This is them now, okay? And this is them. This is where they are in the horizontal 2D plane of like gameplay space. And so basically, if you are down here like this, if you're gliding and someone hits that bubble, you're going to be spiked, right? And if you're not gliding, it's just going to do damage. And so, but it's you can see it's like a little wonky and deceptive, where it's kind of hard to hit. And people, especially if you're not used to that mechanic, or knowing that that's like where you're aiming as the enemy player, you know, it can be sort of like easy to miss, especially in this transition between, right, where I'm here and I'm going down, like kind of right here. It's like kind of hard to hit someone because they're kind of getting that instant separation. So you're like aiming at their body, and then all of a sudden their hitbox is like above them because it turns into that bubble. So basically, when you're crossing the abyss, like my sort of favorite way without gliding is just like, if it's a big gap, just a little hop, dash it over, mantle up. And I think that's going to get you, or like, you know, depending on your character, like someone like Hudson with a big glide dash, that's really just a, you know, a jump dash and you're over. But just like don't glide unless you have to. Basically, gliding is like, how do I save myself if I'm about to cross that bottom line? And if you are going to do it, you want to think about doing it maybe in shorter bursts. And if you're in a really tough spot, you can even sort of like juggle it at the bottom, like rather than using the sort of verticality thing I was talking about. And the thing you're looking for to save yourself here when you have to glide is any enemy or projectiles around your bubble. So like the worst things that you're going to get spiked by a ton are like the little freaking Celeste icicles, ghost bullets, Firefox flamethrower, things that are sort of just like hanging around or not even necessarily like aimed a lot of the time. They're just like flying around randomly in the chaos of fights. Those are the little things that are gonna, or projectiles from bosses, from creeps. Like all the NPCs on the map can spike you if they hit you with anything in the air when you're gliding. So as you're in this pattern of kind of like down and up, if you're in a situation where you're under fire, it's a little bit of a mind game of like you're literally watching this bubble and seeing if there's any projectiles nearby, and in the split seconds where there's no projectiles, you try to glide, right? So everyone's like shooting at you, you're like, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god, and you're literally watching this, and you're only hitting that glide like when there's no projectiles around there. And it's like, it's sort of like it's a pretty like funny, like ends up being like a funny like mind game kind of, where you know, someone's shooting at you and you're basically watching them. When you're down here, you're watching them and you're gliding in between their shots, right? Let's say it's another myth shooting at me. I see her shoot and I'm literally trying to glide in between her, you know, shots, so she literally can't spike me. And if she does hit my bubble, she's just going to do the normal damage, but it's not going to just like send me straight down, right? So then the other thing that this sort of verticality aspect does is it gives you the ability to actually do stuff over the abyss. So if you learn to glide like this and use the momentum on the way up, you can actually like, you know, kind of accomplish some things and fight a bit over the abyss. And this is where the mind games really come into play. So like, let's say I'm battling like another myth over the abyss out here. If I see her do this, when she's on her next way down, if there's a way I can cover, like you want to basically be watching for when an enemy is on their way down, because when they're on their way down, you know they have to glide in like a second. Like if you see me doing this, I have to glide there at some point. Like if especially if I don't have a dash, or if we're like way out in the abyss, I have to glide like somewhere in that descent, and it's only like a second. So if you see an enemy on their descent, your goal is to just spray their bubble, because you're trying to just, and it's a little harder on someone like Myth, right? But you're trying to just like blast their bubble as much as you can, because that as soon as they try to glide, if you're shooting at their bubble, something's going to hit it and they're just going to get insta spiked. And you can kind of, that same idea applies if you're like, if you and someone else are like out fighting over the abyss. It's like mind games where they're trying to do the same thing to you. And so you can kind of get this like crazy abyss fighting going on. And like if you watch two players that are skilled at movement abyss fight, it's like pretty wild, because you know, you could just kind of do some pretty crazy stuff out here, especially if you haven't really seen a ton of like high level SUPERVIVE. It looks crazy when people are like fighting right over the abyss. But it's basically just like, it's one of those things where this doesn't really exist in any other game that I've played. Like this idea of like, oh, we're way up in the sky and like you have a glider, and if you're gliding and it gets hit, like it destroys and you just instantly die. Like in a PvP game, that's not really something we have to worry about usually. So this like whole new layer of like abyss and spiking and gliding adds like a really like cool, unique dynamic to SUPERVIVE. And when you really consider it, when you're on the map, like a huge chunk of the map is abyss. Like, I don't know about half, but maybe like 30-40% is abyss. So there are a lot of scenarios where you're going to be need to like comfortable. You want to be completely comfortable fighting over the abyss. So you basically want to do, you know, a combination of everything we talked about. You want to get used to the depth of this line. You want to learn how to juggle gliding low while avoiding projectiles around your bubble. You want to learn how to, you want to get comfortable with your normal gliding pattern, which is this sort of deep, then up. Like if you're trying to go far on your glider, or if you're trying to fight, it's deep, then up, and you're using that upward momentum of the glider to give you a lot of time in the air, right? And then you're weaving in your dash to mantle. And so you're always basically, you know, kind of like doing some combo of all these things we just talked about to be, not like that, to be super shifty over the abyss and, you know, kind of play with it, but never die. And if you get good at this type of gameplay, what you can do, especially on certain characters like Luna, Ghost, Firefox is pretty good. Celeste is one of the best. There are some champions that like excel over Abyss, and you like someone like Celeste, you can literally bait enemies out over the Abyss. Like I've seen plenty of my friends do this, and like Lemur does this. Literally bait enemies out over the Abyss to chase you, and you can just 1v4. If you understand these mechanics, you can literally just 1v4 spike them all, because they literally won't with Celeste's like glide and stuff. Like other hunters won't have enough juice to like keep up with her, and she has such good spiking with her homing icicles, and they're kind of hard to see over the abyss because they're blue. They got that little red tint to them, but there are certain hunters that are really good at sort of like maximizing the potential of these techniques, and champions with good dashes are really good at it as well. So I really like Abyss play on Myth. So that's another reason why Luna is so good, is she has really strong dash. And so, and two of them, right? So you have the ground charge and the air charge, and so using them over the abyss is like, combined with all this stuff we're talking about, can make Luna like extremely. If you guys want a good person to watch for like movement and who's really good at this, JaytheYggdrassil is his name. He's he used to like play a bunch of Luna, but he's been playing a bunch of like Brawl and Rocket Jumper now. But his thing is like movement tech in games, and I think he's literally like the best mover in SUPERVIVE right now, like not even joking. And I had a game the other day where I literally just watched him 1v4 on Brawl. He was on my team. He just carried the shit out of me. And he was 1v4ing on Brawl consistently for like the whole match. Like literally like just kind of running around on his own solo, because Brawl has some of the best movement in the game, and Jay has like completely mastered his movement, and a huge part of that movement is over the abyss. And so if you're looking for someone to kind of like just watch cool gameplay of this kind of like crazy movement, I'll link his YouTube channel in the comments, because I think he has some of the most kind of like, if you just watch his gameplay, you can really learn a lot from kind of like what he's doing and how he's moving. Okay, so my last recommendation here is one that might be a little controversial, but I can tell you that probably like more than half of the top players I know do this, and the ones that don't really have a good reason for it, other than they already started the other way. And so my recommendation is rebind your glider key off of space. And the reason this is because by default, space is jump. And so you're literally trying to have two different movement controls on the same button, because if you press it again, you will also glide. And that can essentially create a lot of problems where you will accidentally glide when you're trying to jump. And like, let's say you have even a little bit of latency here, guys, and I jump, and I'm pressing space because I need to jump again. If I have a little bit of latency and I have it bound like that, it's going to put out my glider over the ground. If someone's shooting at me, I'm just going to get insta spiked on the ground. It doesn't make sense to have two independent movement controls on the same button if they can interfere with each other like that. And you'll feel there are certainly scenarios where they interfere with each other. And the only argument for having them on the same button is I'm used to it, or I'm lazy and I don't want another keybind. And that's totally fine if you don't care about actually getting spiked sometimes. But if you're trying to be, like a top level player, if you really, want to have full control over your character's movement without sort of like it accidentally messing up like that, I highly encourage changing your keybind for glide to something else. And so you see, I have mine on, so these will both be space by default. I have mine on thumb mouse button. And this is just like the easiest, the one right by my thumb on my mouse. And I've tried a bunch of different stuff for my glider bind. This one feels the best to me because it doesn't interfere with your WASD at all, because it's on your right hand now. It's with your LMB, your RMB, and your aiming. It's not on your left hand, where you have, on your left hand, you have all your abilities, you have all your movement, you have your WASD, you have your 4 abilities, you have your 2 powers. So you have a lot, just like wow, you have a lot of sort of like inputs going in on your left hand. And so the glider on like a thumb mouse button feels really good to me, because you can sort of like be doing everything with your left hand and independently glide, and it doesn't really like mess with your aim. And you can't, the other thing is you can't shoot while you're gliding. And so there's no reason to like, if I'm holding this left mouse button to glide, I don't need to be like have precise aim. And so holding the mouse button doesn't ever mess up my aim at all, because you can't shoot when you're gliding. So you can't, like, there's no reason to like need to aim precisely. And so, yeah, this is, and you know, obviously you can put it on any bind. You can also keep it on space if that's your vibe. But this is just sort of my recommendation. And I didn't make this up. I got this recommendation from top players and some of the devs that do it. But again, not everyone does it. It's like split. Like not all the top players do it. Not all the devs do it. But a good chunk of them do. And I think, you know, a lot of the best ones do, because it literally gives you more control over your character, and it completely eliminates any scenario where you would ever accidentally jump and glide. It's impossible now to accidentally glide while I'm jumping, because I'm not ever hitting that. I'm spamming the crap out of spacebar right now, and you know, there's no way I'm ever going to spike myself. The only way I ever glide is when I absolutely need to, and that's with my thumb mouse button. And yeah, the goal is just being a total abyss ninja and baiting everyone over it and then murdering them and making them feel the spike pain while you bask in the glory of your abyss control. I hope this video will help you accomplish that, my friend. That's really all I have for this one. I'm going to continue doing little mechanics videos like this on stuff that I think is important or useful. I'm also doing beginner's guides and all the champions. I have the first 3 out on Myth, Ghost, and Shiv. If you check the channel, they're up, and I'm going to try to do all of them. So I'm going to be trying to do like as much as I can. Like I'm shooting for 1 a day. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull that off, because those first 3 I recorded before launch, but I'm going to try my very best to just keep getting them to you guys consistently and working my way through all the hunters. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to take care of yourself and keep vibing. Catch you in the next one. Peace.